Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for our September Take and Make. Today we're going to make a Scarecrow mason jar craft that you can use as a cute fall decoration. Here's a list of supplies that will come in your kit. You will also need a pair of scissors for cutting and trimming throughout the craft. And if you have a hot glue gun, feel free to use this instead of the tacky glue that has been provided. Before we get started, here are a few helpful tips. Paint the mason jar ahead of time to ensure that the paint is dry and ready to be decorated. The tacky glue works best if you press and hold the object you're trying to attach. Feel free to use a hot glue gun instead to speed up the drying process. And as always, feel free to get creative throughout this process and alter any steps to fit your needs. Let's get started. The first thing you want to do is remove the mason jar lid. You will not need it for this project. Then, paint your mason jar using the provided tan paint and foam brush. In order to get a solid finish, you will need 4 coats of paint. Keep the coats thin and make sure that the paint is fully dry before moving on to the next coat. This will take a little time, but will ensure that you get a nice solid finish. You can do fewer coats to get a different texture, which you can see in the photo here. Make sure to let the jar dry completely before moving on to the next step. Now that the mason jar is dry, we can put together the Scarecrow's face. You will need your sheet of felt, wooden buttons, permanent marker, tacky glue, glue dots, and a pair of scissors. First, we need to make the nose. Use your scissors to cut out a rounded triangle out of the sheet of felt. I first cut a regular triangle slightly larger than I needed and then rounded the edges, as you can see in the photo. You can do this freehand or use a pencil to draw the shape you want on your felt before cutting it out. We provided you with a sheet of felt so that you can experiment with different shapes and sizes. Before gluing anything down, you first want to make sure that you're satisfied with the layout of the Scarecrow's face. Remember that you will eventually be covering the upper part of the jar when you add your Scarecrow's hair and headband, so you don't want to put the eyes too far up. Take a moment to decide where you want to place your eyes, nose, and mouth, and you can use these images to help with the placement. When you're ready, use the tacky glue to attach the felt nose. Press and hold that in place for about 15 seconds to secure it. It's going to take a little bit of time to dry, but it should stay in place while you continue to the next steps. Next, you're going to use the glue dots to attach the flat side of the wooden button eyes to the jar. You will need 1 glue dot for each button. Make sure, again, to press and hold them in place to secure. Then use the permanent marker to create a mouth and face details like shown in the photo. Now we'll move on to the Scarecrow's hair. You'll need your bundle of raffia and scissors for this part. First, cut or untie the bundle of raffia and then divide it into 2 equal-sized bundles. Use 1 piece of the raffia from each bundle to tie it together tightly in the middle. Trim the pieces of raffia holding your bundles together so they're not sticking out. At this point, you can also trim down your bundles in length if you want for a shorter hairstyle. It's up to you. As you can see in the second image, you should be left with 2 identical bundles of raffia. Now you're going to attach the raffia bundles to either side of the mason jar using the 4 remaining glue dots. First, attach the glue dots to the jar. 1 glue dot should go at the top of the jar where the lid screws on. The other will go a little further down where the jar is painted, as you can see in the first photo. Press and hold them down to secure. This will help keep the hair in place while you complete the next step. The next step is to attach the headband. Take the strip of burlap and wrap it around the jar. Use the paper clip to hold it in place at the front while you glue it in the back. Then move the paper clip to the back of the jar to hold it in place while it dries. Use these photos as a reference. After gluing down the burlap strip, you're going to do the same thing with the orange ribbon. So again, use the paper clip to hold everything in place while it dries. Don't worry if it looks a little messy, the tacky glue will dry clear. And the last step is to add the sunflower. I first put a little blob of glue between the headband and the jar and then inserted the stem of the sunflower. This should fit nicely and stay in place while it dries. Again, use this photo to help you with the placement of the stem. Let everything dry completely and you're finished. Thank you for participating in this month's Take and Make. Join us in October to create a spiderweb wall hanging. Sign up begins on October 6th at 9 a.m. on our events calendar. See you next month.